At 41, Michael Phelps finally reveals what we all suspected. The greatest victories in the pool never told the whole story. Behind the gold medals, the world records, and the unforgettable celebrations was a man fighting battles no audience could see. Today, we're looking beyond the headlines to understand the truth that Michael Phelps has openly shared over the years. Story that is far more powerful than any race he ever won. Michael Phelps was born on June 30, 1985, in Baltimore, Maryland. From a young age, he seemed different. Water became his safe place long before it became the stage where he would make history. As a child, he struggled with attention and endless energy. Swimming gave him focus, purpose, and a language he didn't need words to speak. That's what made people fall in love with his story. He wasn't just incredibly talented, he was determined, disciplined, and willing to sacrifice almost everything for a dream that seemed impossible. When most people think about Michael Phelps, they picture gold medals hanging around his neck. They remember Beijing. They remember London. They remember Rio. They remember a swimmer who looked almost unbeatable. But here's the strange thing about greatness. The higher someone climbs, the harder it becomes for anyone to see what they're carrying. For years, fans admired the machine. Few noticed the human being inside it. Maybe that's what we all suspected without fully understanding it. Nobody can perform under unimaginable pressure forever without paying a price. Think about what Michael Phelps was expected to do every single time he entered the water. Winning wasn't enough. Breaking records became normal. If he won by a fraction of a second, people asked why he wasn't faster. Success became his identity. Excellence became his obligation. That's a dangerous place to live. Because once the applause fades, you're left alone with a question that terrifies many elite athletes. Who am I without winning? It's a question Michael Phelps has courageously discussed in interviews and public conversations. After reaching the highest level imaginable, he found himself struggling with depression, anxiety, and an overwhelming sense of emptiness. It shocked fans around the world. How could someone who achieved everything feel like they had nothing? But maybe that's exactly the point. The world often confuses achievement with happiness. They are not the same thing. For years, Michael trained with relentless discipline. Every meal, every workout, every hour of sleep revolved around becoming faster. Imagine living like that for decades. Then imagine waking up one day and realizing the race you've spent your entire life preparing for is over. What happens then? Many athletes retire from sports. Very few know how to retire from the identity that sports created. Michael has admitted there were moments when he isolated himself from others, moments when he didn't want to talk, moments when the weight of expectations became heavier than the medals around his neck. Those confessions weren't signs of weakness. They were acts of extraordinary strength. Because speaking honestly about mental health is often harder than winning a championship. Surprising part is that the clues had always been there. People noticed how intensely focused he was. They noticed the incredible discipline. They noticed the emotional highs after victory and the visible exhaustion that sometimes followed. But very few asked what happened after the cameras stopped recording. That's often where the real story begins. Success can be incredibly loud. Pain is usually silent. Michael Phelps helped change that silence. Instead of pretending everything was perfect, he chose honesty. He spoke openly about therapy. He encouraged others to seek help. He reminded millions that asking for support doesn't make someone less successful. It makes them more human, and maybe that's the greatest lesson of his career. Not the 28 Olympic medals, not the countless records, but the willingness to tell the truth. Because somewhere, someone watching him wasn't another Olympic swimmer. It was a teenager feeling overwhelmed, a parent hiding anxiety, a veteran struggling after service, a professional who looked successful on the outside, but felt empty inside. When Michael shared his struggles, he gave those people permission to speak to. That's influence no medal can measure. There's another side to this story that often gets overlooked. Perfection is addictive. Once people expect perfection from you, it becomes incredibly difficult to admit you're struggling. You start believing that your value depends on continuing to impress everyone else. Michael Phelps broke that cycle. He showed that vulnerability doesn't erase greatness, it completes it. Today, when people talk about his legacy, they still celebrate the records. They still replay the races. They still marvel at accomplishments that may never be matched, but something has quietly changed. He's no longer remembered only as the fastest swimmer. He's remembered as someone who helped redefine what strength actually means. Strength isn't pretending nothing hurts. Strength is admitting something That message resonates far beyond sports. In a world filled with carefully edited social media lives, Michael's honesty feels almost revolutionary. He reminds us that success and struggle can exist together. You can be admired by millions and still need help. You can accomplish extraordinary things and still have ordinary human emotions. There's no contradiction there. That's simply life. As he entered his 40s, many fans noticed something different about him. He seemed calmer, more reflective, less interested in proving himself, and more interested in helping others. That's not because the competitor disappeared, it's because experience reshaped him. The man who once chased records now spends more time encouraging conversations that could save lives. That's a remarkable transformation, and perhaps it's exactly what real maturity looks like. Not becoming flawless, but becoming honest. Sometimes we spend our lives chasing the next achievement, believing happiness is waiting just beyond it. Michael Phelps' journey quietly challenges that belief. It suggests that fulfillment isn't found only in winning. Sometimes it's found in accepting ourselves when we're no longer standing on the podium. That's a difficult lesson, but it's also a freeing one. When future generations look back at Michael Phelps, they'll undoubtedly remember the races that changed Olympic history. They'll remember impossible finishes and record-breaking performances. Yet, they may remember something even more important. A champion who proved that courage isn't limited to competition, it also exists in conversation, in vulnerability, in asking for help, and in reminding others that they are never alone. Maybe that's what we all suspected from the beginning. Beneath the unstoppable competitor was someone carrying the same fears, doubts, and questions that so many of us face. The difference is that he eventually chose to let the world see that side of him. In doing so, Michael Phelps didn't diminish his legacy. He expanded it, because long after records are broken and medals gather dust, honesty continues to inspire. And perhaps the greatest victory of Michael Phelps' life wasn't touching the wall first. It was finally showing the world that even the strongest people sometimes need someone to help them stay afloat.